Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursaleen. Sayyidina wa nabiyyina wa maulana Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Hassan Abuskakhni. I am joined again with my co-host, Anwar Jitam, and two brothers who are very active in the field of deen, in propagation of deen, and in teaching of deen, Maulana Mohammed Bodhania and Shaykh Mohammed Ismail, both from Johannesburg. Today our topic is about Jumu'ah, the Jumu'ah talk specifically, and whether the Jumu'ah talks that we are hearing on a weekly basis in the Masjid, are they relevant to the social issues that we see around us? Is there a need to adjust them? Where do we fall short? Where can our khatibs improve? And what kind of topics should they be speaking about? We'll also examine some elements of the fiqh element of it, the fiqh angle of it, in terms of, is there perhaps a need in some cases for a mixed English and Arabic khutbah? But we'll get into that later and into other topics as well. I welcome Maulana Mohammed Bodhania and Sheikh Mohammed Ismail, and we can get this conversation rolling, inshallah.
Shukran jazilan. I think this is a very important topic right now. Over the years of listening to Jumu'ah lectures, and we're talking about the pre-khutbah Jumu'ah lecture, the one that within the Republic of South Africa is usually given in English. I suppose in other parts of the world where they don't speak Arabic as a first language, would be in other languages, whatever those may be. But over the years of listening to Jumu'ah lectures, there are those that really stand out. There are certain speakers that when you see them on a Jumu'ah roster or you're passing by, a masjid, and you see on the notice board of a masjid, there's a special Jumu'ah and a certain speaker is coming, and you want to go and listen to that particular speaker because generally you've been noticing that they speak well and they have a good message, alhamdulillah. And also over the years, sometimes you come across the sentiment that where some people have said, what, the Jumu'ah lecture is boring. Or sometimes even the khatib, the person doing, rendering the Jumu'ah lecture will say that, it's a tough crowd. And I suppose this is a public speaking dynamic that we need to unpack, because this is something within the Muslim community that every week, alhamdulillah, there is a Jumu'ah lecture. I think there's a handful, maybe, or more, slightly more, of masajid and musallas around the country where you don't hear a Jumu'ah lecture. Most masajid and most musallas have a Jumu'ah lecture, and I do believe it's very, very important that there is a Jumu'ah lecture.
The Jumu'ah, the mimbar, is the place from where we get our guidance on a weekly basis, and that extends to political issues, societal issues, issues around basic fundamentals of deen and how we live our lives as Muslims. But maybe let me throw this out there to get some comments and get the conversation started maybe in a different way. I'll reference my experience today in Jumu'ah. And alhamdulillah, the English talk was a very important topic. It was well received, I think, by the audience, and it spoke about a very important issue, and that's about the fitrah and how we can preserve our fitrah or get back in touch with our fitrah. How can we reconnect our fitrah, and how do we protect the fitrah of our children? But I'm specifically thinking about the Arabic khutbah that followed it. It was a very, very long, elaborate, and very eloquent khutbah in Arabic. And I couldn't help but think, is it really necessary for a crowd that doesn't really understand Arabic? An audience of non-Arabic speakers, what is the fa'idah? What's the benefit of having such a long and elaborate khutbah? Perhaps that could have been added, the time could have been added to the English talk, or, more emphasis could have been placed on the English talk that people can understand, where most of the people actually take their benefit from, when they go home and tell their families what they heard in the masjid on a Friday. They're referring to the English talk, not the khutbah so much. So perhaps khatibs need to think about what the needs of their audience is more than what they believe is important. How do you guys feel about that?
I think the use of the word fitra alone, um, it's I'd hate to say it in any in a very sort of adversarial way, but that's part of the problem that I see is that we using technical terms that a lot of the time, even in the English, people don't understand. And we expect them to understand things because we take it for granted that there's a very high level of Islamic education, or at least a conversant level of Islamic education that everyone shares. And I think this is part of the challenge that khatibs or those who are speaking on a weekly basis from the mimbar face, is that does what they talk about actually resonate with people? And if you're talking about a specific topic and you're using a lot of jargon, you're using a lot of Arabic terms, most likely people are losing out. They're not getting everything you're saying because in your mind it makes sense. And you anticipate that they understand what you're saying, but actually a lot of it is lost because it's lost in in the understanding of the Arabic language. I think that's the first thing that I sort of wanted to throw out as part of the discussion is that when khatibs and speakers do address the public, what mindset do they come with to the platform? What mindset do they come with in the sense that how much do they assume things from the public, and then based on that assumption they would then put out a topic. Whilst we were at it, and I'll just add this to the discussion. I think you're quite right. You'd sit on the mimbar when it comes to the Arabic part, and you'll either do two things. You'll go through a very short address, which just fulfills the minimum conditions of what an Arabic address should be, or you'd go on one with that's a bit more elaborate, aligned to what you just spoke about. In both instances, I actually think there's a problem. One is that it's just a ritualistic, exchange, or a ritualistic thing that you do it quickly and you just, get through the fundamentals. And there's really no soul in it. And on the other hand, when there is soul in it, when there is a spirit in it, it gets, too long and drawn out. And in fact, you're just worried whether people understand it. So that I think is also part of the challenge we face. And it runs through our minds every week, week in and week out. The last thing that I'd add, just whilst we were talking about, and we are recording this on a Friday evening, a friend of mine sent me a message today. And he said, after his Jumu'ah khutbah, and he said to me, I've just come from a community where it felt like the people were dood, right? The community I was addressing, the crowd was literally dead. I felt like I was giving everything and I was getting nothing in return, and I'm left so dejected. So I think these are part of, I guess it's part of today's discussion. But yeah, that's what I'd add as a part, a beginning shot from my side.
We've all maybe experienced that, standing up there in front and at the podium, so to speak. Most of us have looked out at the crowd and thought, Subhanallah, must be doing something wrong. I certainly have. Mona Mohammed, is there anything you'd like to add to what Sidi Muhammad Ismail said?
Well, firstly, on the point that you made earlier on with regards to the Arabic khutbah after the English khutbah, what's the need, right, for the Arabic khutbah? I think this is, subhanAllah, to keep the fever, the spirit of the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam alive. Remember, our purpose in life is always to follow the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And if you look at the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, whenever he, subhanallah, gave the sermon, it was always in Arabic. Instead of looking at it from the perspective of, oh no, we don't know Arabic, why must there be two Arabic khutbahs? Why don't we start learning Arabic? This is Lughatul Quran, this is Lughatu Ahlil Jannah. So this is actually, instead of trying to remove the spirit of Arabic from the Jumu'ah khutbah, I think it's important that people actually start desiring to understand Arabic so they can desire to understand the Quran as well as the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I mean, we'll find, of the kutub which write of the etiquette of the khutbah or of Jumu'ah, you will find that the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum, even when they travel to foreign lands, right, non-Arab speaking lands, subhanallah, they would also deliver the khutbah in Arabic. Yes, maybe they would try to learn the dialect and give da'wah in that particular language. But when it came to the khutbah itself, then they would give the khutbah in Arabic. So remember, our purpose is to follow the sunnah as much as we can. Yes, to accommodate the locals, we add the English khutbah or the language of the people to begin with. But to keep the spirit of Jumu'ah there, to keep the spirit of the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam alive, and also to create the desire of people, subhanAllah, to learn Arabic. The Arabic khutbah is there. So I think it's actually necessary, it's important, right? Maybe we don't have to keep it that long. I mean, as speakers, we also should use intelligence in the way we present certain things. If you spoke for 20 minutes, don't go give another 20-minute, Arabic lecture. But I think even if you cut it down to about 7 minutes, but subhanAllah, just to keep the spirit alive, make people interested in Arabic also for that matter. And we know how many times when people listen to the Arabic khutbah, they learn du'as from it, they learn verses of the Quran. Even for those who speak Arabic, how interesting it is when we get to understand the Arabic khutbah as well. So I think just to keep the fever, the spirit of the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam alive, that is why we have the dual khutbah. We have the English and then we have the Arabic afterwards.
With you, and I follow you, and I do think the Arabic khutbah, the two of them are very, very important. And the real discussion here, though, is like, for example, sometimes is it too short to fulfill the arkan, the pillars of the Arabic khutbah, or is it sometimes, how can I say, for example, maybe there's a disjoint between the Arabic khutbah, the contents, the subject matter of the Arabic khutbah, and the subject matter of the English lecture that preceded it. But beyond those discussions of fiqh, the other important discussions and that's really what we want to discuss in terms of, for example, the both of you are speakers, right? Can you share, for example, some of the insights, like, for example, when you are invited for a Jumu'ah, you find yourself on a Jumu'ah roster, right? You at a certain masjid or a certain musalla, and you're going to prepare. What are the type of things that goes through your mind before you go out and deliver said Jumu'ah a lecture? What's the type of things that you'll do to prepare prepare yourself for that?
طيب, inshallah. I think what's important is preparation. That is the key. Honestly speaking, when you stand up there, the audience can read you on whether you have prepared and whether you haven't prepared. You know that because when you sit in the audience, you can see if someone is prepared or not. And we were speaking earlier on the reception you receive from the audience. How much of time and effort have you taken into preparing your speech? How much time and dedication have you given to your bayan? And how much time and dedication have you given to the connection you have with the audience in order for you to receive a reception from them? It's a very extremely important thing, right? And how the preparation process, well, for me personally, how it works is I try to be as relevant as I can in what's going on, right? I mean, there's no point speaking about George Washington, right? At this time here, when Donald Trump's the president of the United States of America. So you got to be relevant. And subhanAllah, we'll find in the deen that, we have our classical text. But there's no stagnation in deen. There's always progression because if Quran is the living guidance right up until the day of Qiyamah, it will always fit and be appropriate for the time we find ourselves in. So whatever situation or climate we find ourselves in at that particular time, how can we apply the verses of the Quran and the Sunnah to the topic we want to discuss? And you have to be relevant. I think that is very important. What is going on in the news? What is going on social media? Alhamdulillah, I'm a bit young. I don't know about the other mashayikh, mashallah. But I'm very clued up on what's going on social media in terms of YouTube, in terms of the vloggers, the bloggers, those people who the youngsters are following. So you try to, include certain lingo also that people are speaking and what's relevant, in terms of global happenings. Because, I mean, this is a global village. So we can be in South Africa, but we know what's going on in America. And a lot of people are watching what is going on in America. Right? So speak about certain things that are taking place that are relevant. You got to change it up, right? If you're going to speak of a salah, alhamdulillah, it's important. But how do you present that now? We got an audience who has been listening to Salah for the past 50 years. Now, how do we present it in a manner where, subhanAllah, they are learning something new? They know that Salah is obligatory, but what are you presenting to them that's drawing them towards the masjid? So you gotta also give time to the preparation that you present on a Friday, right? So think about the topic. And subhanAllah, I think it's important that the topic you speak about is something that you want to hear yourself. If you're not interested in the topic, who's going to listen to you? Understand? So you gotta want to listen to yourself speak. If you're not interested in what you have to say, how do you expect somebody else to listen to you? So try to put yourself in the audience shoes. Okay, this is taking place. What would I like to hear if I have to go to a Jummah khutbah today? What do I feel is relevant enough for me to really pay attention to what the khatib is saying? Let your mind run with ideas, one idea, three ideas, four ideas, and then subhanallah, you start pitching things together and piecing the puzzle together, and then you come up with something beautiful. Why? Because you are wanting to hear it yourself, and when you are dedicated to what you want to speak about, other people will lend their ears to you.
Yeah, I think we've used the word relevance. And what, I was just trying to think that have we, overused the word in this context? Because a lot of khatibs, a lot of scholars who address the public would say, I wish to always remain relevant, because that means that people are interested in what I'm saying. So I guess maybe I'll just continue then on that sort of chain of thought and say that for me, I would like to be relevant, but I think relevant for me is understanding the audience from a socioeconomic perspective, understanding the audience from an age perspective, because as much as we want to be appealing to our younger brothers and sisters, and I say younger brothers and sisters because a lot of the Masajid, alhamdulillah, where I am fortunate to give discourse at, does cater for both males and females in the communities that I come from and in the communities that I frequent. So alhamdulillah for that. So we talk about the youngsters. We want to remain relevant to them, but I think there is also the working class, and those that are entrepreneurs, those that are in corporate life, and then of course you have the elderly and those that are much senior. So I think every one of those, demographic groups and age groups require, when I say demographic, is actually another thought. We need to remain relevant to blacks, whites, Indians, and coloreds, because we know that in our community we are multiracial. We have a very integrated society. We have people from various diverse backgrounds, and all of them have their own requirements and what is relevant to each one of them. There are specific things that are relevant to each one of them. I always use the example when you talk about, you go to a community where the socioeconomic conditions are much less and it's not as affluent, and you go and you make your Ramadan joke that the moon is not going to be sighted outside, before the women sight the moon in their freezers, because they're referring to the samosa that's made like a moon and it's in the freezers. Some people don't have the luxury of the food that you have stored up for months and weeks on end. Some people can't afford a moon, a samosa, right? So I think, sometimes you need to take that into account when you address people, because then how you engage them, the challenge on you to engage them, it needs to, it puts more on you than to understand who you're talking to. And I think when I work through what I'd like to address, I take that by and large into account. And because I'm more or less in the same areas, I've sort of got that bedded down. And then I try to talk to people like Maulana Muhammad said, speak to them in their lingo. So if you've got a bit of Afrikaans, because I speak in the Afrikaans community where I grew up, I will throw in a word or two from an Afrikaans perspective. I'm not going to go and use high technical terms because perhaps maybe, the level of English in those areas aren't as advanced as they would be in another area. So I take that into account. And then I think the last point that I will make is that I try to be as as less verbose as I can be, and what I mean by that is I don't try to pitch it at a level where not everyone can understand. I want people to understand, and so I try to prepare it with that in mind. I intentionally, and I know some scholars have been been ridiculed for this in the past, that, firstly, not all scholars are as eloquent, as versatile, as strong in their memory, for example, as some of the more proficient and scholars that are out there. So not everyone can do Arabic quotations followed by an, not everyone can, quote poetry. Not everyone has that prowess, and may Allah increase those that do have that, and may we aspire to be like them. Ameen. But I take that into account. I think to myself, do people actually, if you quote a verse, are people following it? Yes, there's the barakah of the ayah of the Holy Quran, which is the verse from the Holy Quran, and there's good in that. But sometimes, if you think about a 20-minute address, and if 5, 10 minutes are taken up by Arabic, it does become, you lose out on the ability to connect more if you were just to speak in the language. So I try to do quotations and so forth in the language, most dominantly, of course, in the English language. So that's another thing that I do intentionally as part of my preparation, is to really keep it to the English, keep it to the point, keep it to a way that people can immediately understand what I'm saying.
Sheikh Hassan, you've taken the member on many occasions. What's your process?
Well, look, I think just touching on what Mullah Muhammad and Sheikh Mohammed Ismail said, I think relevance, the term relevance, perhaps we can replace that with appropriateness, since, it's very seldom, and in fact, I can't really think of one experience where what the Khatib was speaking about was utter nonsense. The content of what is being shared from the mimbar is always Quran and Sunnah. So we can never say that that's irrelevant. There is a fa'idah in it, there is a benefit in it for someone. Perhaps the better term is appropriateness. Is the message that they are giving, or is the advice that they are taking from the Quran and the Sunnah, is that appropriate and applicable to the situation that people are experiencing in their community? So what I try to do always is think about, I think often about the statement of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Sayyidatuna Aisha radiallahu anha, anzilu nasa manazilahum, so treat people according to their status, but I apply it in the sense of speak to people according to their circumstances, according to the issues that they experience, and I try to tap into the community and see what people are concerned about, what people are talking about. And recently, as of the last, I'd say 6 months or so, I've particularly been applying that to the youth in my community and thinking, what are young people into? What are they? Not that I'm necessarily an old person, but I'm on the verge of not being a youth anymore, according to the ANC definition. I'm 35 now, so on my next birthday, I'm officially no longer a youth. But I try to think, what are the Gen Z people? What are they into? What are they worried about? What is causing them to doubt their iman? What kind of threats and dangers are out there for them, and what kind of assistance can we give them? What kind of guidance can we give them from the Quran and Sunnah? And how can we make them more attached to the Masjid? How can we make the Masjid the primary source of information and the primary source of guidance for them on every issue? So I always try to look at things from that perspective. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for me. I request everyone's du'as, inshallah. But yeah, I think it's important to analyze the community that you're speaking to, like Sheikh Mohammed Ismail also said. Try to use as much as you can terminology that's familiar to the people in that area. I try to do very much the same thing. So that's more or less my process. How about yours, Sheikh Anwar? You're also a seasoned Khatib.
Well, I can't say seasoned. I do take the member on occasion, sometimes more often than others. And then sometimes I do get, that break, which is nice. But my personal process is I like to see what's happening in the world. I also like to look at the Islamic calendar, and I like to also look at the Gregorian calendar. So I put 2 or 3 things together because, for example, we are in the month of Dhul Qa'dah. Soon we're going to be at Dhul Hijjah. It's the period of Hajj. There's a lot that has to be said to communities because of the period of Hajj. Whether individuals, are going for Hajj, that will be listening to whatever the Jumu'ah khutbah is, or their family, their friends may be traveling, or none of that is happening. But just the fact that we are living in, we are living through the period of Dhul Qa'dah and Dhul Hijjah. So by way of example, you have to keep in mind the Islamic calendar, and whether it's auspicious occasions like Ramadan, like Muharram, or it is matters of Islamic history, like what has taken place in the seerah of the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, or the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, or even the latter generations, things that have happened within Islamic history. Like, for example, today, you know, what was spoken about was the Nakba that took place in 1948, and 77 years later, and the fact that we have living through a genocide that had to be spoken about. So my process in sum is the idea of looking at the Islamic calendar, looking at what's happening in the world, looking at the Gregorian calendar, and basically seeing what's appropriate. Also, I do like what Sidi Muhammad Ismail is saying, and what Sheikh Mohammed Bodhania is saying, and which is basically about knowing the audience, and also sometimes doing that research to know your audience and to know that masjid or musalla that you've been assigned to for Jumu'ah duties. If it means that, for example, like, one has to go and visit that musalla or masjid a few weeks before, just as a musalli. You're not on duty for Jumu'ah as yet, right? You're maybe not on duty that week. So you go and sit in that masjid for Jumu'ah, see how proceedings are, look at the crowd, get an idea, because maybe in 2 weeks' time, 3 weeks' time, whatever it may be, or the next week, you're going to be there for Jumu'ah. And you want to be able to give a message that is relevant to those people. So I always ask, the respected imams that may invite me, okay, what would you prefer that I speak on? Can you tell me a little bit about your masjid? With universities, my personal practice has been to ask whoever is calling me, usually it's from the MSA, is to ask them what's happening on campus right now. What are students thinking about? What are students worried about? Is it exams? Is it not exams? Just to understand a lay of the land. And if it meant going to visit before, I would do that personally, because I mean, like, it takes nothing, to say, okay, I'm just making a quick turn. I'm gonna be coming here in a month's time or 2 weeks' time or whatever. Just attend the masjid, see what's happening, read the masjid board. The masjid boards, when they're updated regularly, they give you a very interesting picture of the community. And if you're going to be speaking there, you get an idea of, okay, you know what, this community, perhaps this message is more appropriate. Perhaps this is not the best thing to talk about right now. So that's my process. It's not an exact science, but this is what I've been doing.
Maybe just share my screen. I love sharing my screen. Sheikh Anwar knows by now. I hope it comes out properly. But this is like an interesting study that the Yaqeen Institute did, and I often share things from Yaqeen Institute because I think they do a lot of tremendous research, very beneficial research. So this is a study that was done on Muslim youth in the United States. It's not a very comprehensive or vast study because the study group was only 30 Muslim individuals, young people in America. And out of the 30, 26 of them described themselves as regular masjid goers, but only 3 of them said yes to feeling welcomed in the masjid. And then there's a quote here, if you can look block on this infographic, that says reinforcement of Islamophobic messages in Islamic spaces. And then one of the quotes is, he's always shouting in his khutbahs, especially when he talks about Palestine or Syria. It's like, man, why are you always so angry? So this made me think of some conversations I've had with other khatibs, other imams, and about there is a tendency of some imams to get very passionate when they speak, and sometimes also to have focus a bit more on tarheeb than on targheeb. So more on sort of lecturing and censuring people than perhaps bringing a positive encouragement. So in what ways can we improve on not making people in South Africa feel left out from the the masjid spaces, especially young people, because I can only imagine, look, this is a small study that was done in the United States, but I've heard the sentiment in South Africa as well, fairly often. So what can we do as speakers to accommodate young people more? I think Mohammed has touched on this earlier, but what can we do to accommodate the Muslim youth in the masjid to make that space the primary place from where they get their guidance from?
On that particular point of those who stand up on the mimbar, where the audience feels like they're shouting all the time. I think it's important. It comes down to, do those who actually give the khutbah and the bayanat, have they got any experience in public speaking? Have they learned etiquette of public speaking in terms of dress code, in terms of voicing and the vocal, the pitching of their bayan to the audience? When to raise the voice, when to drop the voice, because you can't be speaking about Jannah and shouting the people. It doesn't work. That's why you have the maqamat in qira'ah, because when you come to the verses of Jahannam, there has to be this sad, sort of tone that is the verses are recited with. Whereas if you come to the verses of, Jannah, then it's in a sweeter tone. Unfortunately, nowadays, when it comes to the English khutbah, you either find someone very monotone or you find someone shouting all the time. I think we have to move away from this particular, sermon-like bayans that are put forward to the people. Try sometimes to speak to people. We were talking earlier on about how do you attract someone. Make him feel like you're talking to him instead of shouting him. Like eye contact. Where do you look? How do you look at the person? Where do you pause? How do you raise your voice? How do you drop the voice? So these are important things and keynotes that are needed in order to draw your audience to you. If you're gonna make them feel like you're having a personal conversation with them, then they're gonna give you that personal attention. But if you are not giving them any eye contact, you're just screaming all the time, who's going to listen? So I think these are important things, especially those who are going to be speaking, to take up some course or some, lessons from people who are, giving talks for a long time, just to learn some etiquette from them on how to present their talks to people. I'll just speak on that particular point. Sheikh Mohammed, you can speak on what Sheikh Hassan has asked with regards to the youth, inshallah.
Look, I think for me in particular, it's a very difficult one to address with a direct answer. I generally ask myself the question, why is it that a lot of the, a lot of what you would find from online influencers or, I guess your socialites, your influencers, what do they do that actually creates that hook? What is it that they are doing? And we believe and we understand that there's a lot that goes in the background, that goes on in the background to create that hook. There's psychology as part of it. There's various theories that have been, have been researched and gives them the insight, that allows them to be able to create that hook. And I ask myself that a lot of the youngsters that we are struggling so hard, and I'll call it that, and I don't want to try and create this us and them, even though it sounds like that it really isn't the case. They are easily, they flow into that into that discourse. They find resonance. They find it easy to enjoy what they are listening to and what they're exposing themselves to. And then I ask myself, do we have to go down that path? Do we have to research all of that? Do we have to try and create those hooks? And I think Muhammad makes a good point. In the old days, they used to call it Toastmasters, where you needed to go for a course on how to speak in various scenarios and circumstances. And I think likewise with the youth, it's important, and in any other of the age groups, to find out how you would attract them with. If there are some psychological tools that you can use and methods, then you should avail yourself to that. But having said all of that, I think ultimately for me it comes down to where, what has shaped their minds before they came to the mimbar. We put a lot of pressure on the imam that is giving the khutbah on a Friday to be everything to everyone. But that imam is only there for 20 minutes, and the gap and the time that he has, in light of the full week, is but a minuscule percentage, right? What are those kids exposed to in all other spheres. If you try and get into that, maybe it's about rather saying those actually, and no, I'm not maybe answering the question directly, but I think there's a lot of mind framing that happens throughout the week that people come with to a Jumu'ah lecture, and it's very difficult actually. Maybe that is exactly what I'm saying. It's very difficult to try and attract a certain segment by using a catchy topic. A topic is not enough. There has to be content. And then when it comes to the content can be relevant to that particular age group, but is it in the way they want to receive it? So yeah, I guess I'm saying I don't have the full answer, but I'm just throwing some thoughts into the discussion pot.
You must speak in an American accent, and then they listen.
So, Mullah Muhammad, I'm with you. I actually thought about that many times. So, we all are accustomed to. So, if I listen to Sheikh Hassan speak because from Cape Town, I may make fun of him. He may make fun of me. We may make fun of her, of someone from Durban. But an American resonates with everyone. Why? Because it's the language of entertainment. It's the language of, what people hear most of the time. And we don't see it as foreign. It's a language, or sorry, it's an accent that we hear all the time, and we hear it from, the most influential socialites out there. So it's easy on the ear. It's like, oh, that's a home for me. But when someone else speaks, and perhaps maybe now, the idea is really should start speaking like a Korean, because I believe that is the latest trend in capturing the hearts and minds of people.
There's 2 points I want to make based on you guys' comments, right? Is that one about the person that is a guest speaker, and they have 20 minutes to engage that respective audience, that community, right? I think, in my humble opinion, the audience, the Jama'ah usually responds differently to an imam that they are familiar with compared to a guest speaker who's maybe coming for the first or second or third time, someone that's still getting used to. I think that the local the local imams of a masjid, they carry a very big responsibility. So what happens is that you would sometimes actually see the Jama'ah, right, responding very differently when it is their local imam who's giving the Jumu'ah lecture compared to when it's a guest speaker. This is just my observations, and I could be totally wrong, right? Also, we have in a lot of South African Masajid is that usually the Jumu'ah lecture is like the only type of spiritual education, religious education, and Islamic reminder that a person gets in that entire week, right? We know that this is a problem because maybe the masjid is not as active enough, or maybe the person is not as interested enough, or even if they are interested, they may not actually have the time to be able to do anything else but attend the Jumu'ah lecture. So what happens then is that you have an individual carrying the big responsibility of talking about the deen, conveying that message to the whole of the community, but they now have to do everything in that moment, everything from teaching aqidah to inspiring people, to giving them a positive message, to giving them a practical message, and something that's time appropriate, appropriate for that time and space. In the sense of what's happening in the world, what's happening in the ummah, the Islamic calendar, and anything else, right? So it's a lot to carry in that moment. But I also think that different communities respond to different messages. And different communities also engage their khatibs when they sit in there, they respond in different ways. Like in this business of screen sharing, two can play at this game. I want to show you all one of a khatib, visiting khatib from another province that visited Johannesburg, I was going to say South Africa, Johannesburg, back in 2023, and he said some things, right? And I'm going to read this here. Man is saying, and I quote, "Today I was struck by the realization after delivering a Jumu'ah talk. South African Muslims, particularly upper class, but particularly upper middle class or wealthy upcountry Muslim men of Indian descent, don't come to Jumu'ah to hear about Allah's mercy or forgiveness. They seem more interested in hearing about Allah's wrath, vengeance, and punishment. When one tries to...
Sheikh Anwar, you're getting me in trouble here, man.
When one tries to introduce a pertinent topic that falls outside the fire and brimstone ambit, or tries to balance things out by speaking on Allah's mercy towards His creation, it's a snooze fest. The crowd wants us to abuse them from the pulpit, to smack sense, to smack sense into them, to shame them, to guilt them, They want to walk away saying, "Eish, boss, Maulana was banging us today." Except, sure, I was feeling like a true munafiq. And then forget about the whole experience within a few minutes of leaving the mosque. A weekly cycle of trauma and suppressed memories, a flagellation fetish of the soul.
Well, 2 years to the day nearly, Malana. And I remember that exactly where it was and on which day. And it couldn't be more true as it was then as it is today. I think it's still the case.
Two different communities respond to different types of messages differently. That's my question.
There's a lot of assumptions that we make about certain communities. We take that if I'm going to Wits Med School versus Wits main campus, perhaps maybe there's a different audience, and I'll speak about something different. At you could choose the same venue, or at least Wits Med School versus Wits main campus. The next weekend you change it up because you feel that there's something more appropriate to each audience. You could go from Houghton in Johannesburg to El Dorado Park, and you think, yes, because the people are different and they have different backgrounds, you'd wanna, you wanna change it up. But actually, my experience has been that in this environment where we have a lot of scatterbrain, like, I mean, people are so overstimulated that, and people have, you remember one thing that in today's time, a person can get curated content for their likes and wants and needs. All they have to do is go onto YouTube, go onto any other platform, and get the content that they want. So they're not coming to the masjid necessarily with the idea, and I mean, I know this may sound contradictory, but that I want to hear something, that only I want to hear. I think they want to hear something that's going to resonate with everyone. And by and large, from El Dorado Park to Houghton, the problems remain the same in terms of the fundamental problems. Someone in Houghton, I mean, I remember someone may think that if you're going to a Houghton crowd, you need to pitch it at a more intellectual level and you need to sound, more sophisticated, and you need to think about something really, out there and outlandish to pitch to that audience, and then other people will just remain simple and take simple, discourse. I don't think that is the case. I think fundamentally, society, we are global village, number one, as we always say. And number two, the challenges that the ummah face are fundamentally the same challenges. Yes, there's ways you can play up and down on a specific point, definitely. But I don't think there's a difference between Wits Med School and Wits main campus. Fundamentally, in terms of what you should be speaking, I don't think you need to play up to a crowd because people are still dealing with the same issues when they go home. People are still dealing with the issues when you come out of your gated estate as anyone is. So I really, in my own view, I don't think that there's necessarily a reason to try and pitch, yourself in a different manner from area to area. The content, of course, you can play up and down on specific points, as I said.
I think the content of the topic you speak about can remain the same. How you present it may differ based on the community you're speaking to. There's certain jokes maybe you can make in El Dorado Park that you can't make in Houghton, because of the
Exactly, yeah.
audience that's there. There's audiences there. So the topic can stay the same. But how you present it, I think is important. And taking your audience into consideration, I think is extremely important. Right? I mean, we live in that, subhanAllah, in a united country, there's so much of segregation in terms of the fact that you have your Indian communities, you have your African communities, you have your colored communities, and your Malay communities as well. And you can feel the difference when you go to the Masajid. It's evident. And let's not, hide away from this fact here. You can feel the audience, and you can also feel the reception you receive from the audience as well. Right. So I think the topic can stay the same, but the manner upon which you present it, and this is not taking digs at anyone, rather it's out of respect for the community. We have acknowledged who you are as a community. We understand some of you may be a bit more serious than others, and some of you may be lighthearted than others, right? And we have acknowledged that, and therefore the way we present certain things will be different according to who we speak to. I think that's, from my experience, I think that's extremely important. So you keep to the same topic, the same, essence of what you want to speak. The message is the same, but certain jokes you'll make, You can't make the same jokes everywhere because people are not going to receive it in the same manner. So choose your, understand your audience, respect your audience, and I think the way you put your point forward is extremely important.
It's a very, very important point there, because it's basically context related. We always saying, the text and the context. Now, this is the text and the context in action, having an awareness that different communities may respond to different things differently. And I'm not playing with words here. This is the reality. But there's something I'm noticing, at least in my humble experience, whether as a speaker or as a listener of Jumu'ah lectures, is that it seems as if the English lectures, right? The time assigned, and I know this is not the same throughout the entire country, but the time assigned to the pre-Jumu'ah lectures, it's actually becoming shorter and shorter. I know of, for example, within my own community, there are masajid where, for example, 10 minutes is allocated for the pre-Jumu'ah lecture, right? And in other places, you'll get 20 minutes, and well, very rarely you see a masjid that will give maybe like a full half an hour before the two Arabic khutbahs. Yeah, we're living in a time where it is a fact that we are having receding attention spans. Our attention spans are lower. We know that, right? But it just seems like the importance of this weekly this weekly opportunity. It's like the time is getting more crunched, more crunched, more crunched. And I don't know. I know, yes, everybody's working, or students need to get back to their studies and things like that. There, but I think as communities, we may be shooting ourselves in the foot if, like, for example, if we are in charge of masajid and musallas, that we want to cut the Juma lecture time down from maybe if it was at 25 minutes, we're now chop it down to 10 minutes or even 7 minutes. I see this as something problematic that unfortunately will do in our communities a disservice.
I've worked in corporate for 20 years now. And I had worked from a call center where you only had an hour for lunch to other positions where I had more than an hour. And I've never had an issue of leaving at 12:30 or even sometimes 12:20 and being back by 1:30. I've never had an issue, and I've never felt that I needed the imam to speak any less than the time allocated if it was 20 to 25 minutes, as was the standard for a long time. Now, some people may say, yeah, but I mean, perhaps you have a privilege of having that throughout your career. But I've worked with other people and I've never seen that as an issue. So the idea, again, I want to be very guarded when I say this. It's not everyone, but I think for the majority of people that are working, if you have your 1 hour lunch break, you can still get in a 20-minute khutbah. You can get out of the masjid by 1:15, and you can have a burger, you can have a chip roll, and you can eat at your desk if you want to. No one's going to stop you. It's going to be, so there's no reason to try and think, at least from what I'm saying now, and I could be wrong, but as I said, from my experience for the years that I've worked, and I've been with multiple people in that same journey, and I've never had that issue where people felt, you know what, the imam needs to start speaking shorter. Why? If it was the case, it would be because then I need to get to Eccles, or I need to get to the restaurant, or I need to go and have my lunch. And in which case, you have lunch every day. You can eat a simple lunch on a Friday. The idea of the institution of Jumu'ah, I think, is something important. We must respect it. And also, there's another argument, even from within the masjid communities or the masjid committees, is to say, actually, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam spoke very, succinctly. It was short. It was never elaborate, and it was to the point. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was known for his, all-encompassing speech, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We don't have that prowess to speak 10 minutes with an introduction of praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and sending prayers upon Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then getting to a conclusion. That takes already, like, say, 7 minutes. So if you have a 10-minute talk, you literally only have 4 minutes in between to say something. And in that time, if you're just going to quote a hadith, by the time you want to explain it, you already end. And then people leave sometimes without an understanding. They say that hadith doesn't make sense. So I actually think we need to rethink what's the motivation behind this idea that it should be shortened. If it's for people that are entrepreneurs, most of the time they can afford to put other people in their businesses or open up the business or get the going concern without them for a few minutes extra. I think that is easily overcome. And then, like I said, in corporate, I've never seen it as an issue, and I don't think it can be an issue. You can easily get it in your hour lunch or even your 45-minute lunch. So I think we need 20 to 25. Today we had a half an hour, and that was awesome. Some masajid allow that. But then again, it comes down to the time, the concentration span, which I think is a problem. So I just wanted to add that just as a practical example of my own experience over the years that I've been working.
I've generally in Cape Town, it's usually you start at quarter to 1, and then you end at 1:10. I think I've only once encountered someone who give a masjid that gives half an hour. Most of the time it's 20, 25 minutes, but I can't think that I've even counted less than that. I think in Johannesburg, the occasions that I've had the opportunity to speak at Masajid in Joburg, I think also 25 minutes, maybe 20, but that seems to
Look,
be the
and I think
average.
just to quickly to go back to this point, based also on what you're saying, that in Joburg, I mean, the motivation for making it shorter could either come from committees or it comes from the idea that, the community needs to get back to work. Another of my colleagues told me the other day that, look, he reads very short chapters, short surah, so that, people can continue with their work. Some don't even give a dua. So there's various motivations. It could come from both ends. But we really need to see what goes on. Just take when you're not doing your Arabic or you're not doing a khutbah, or you're not doing a Jumu'ah. Take note of what's happening at the time of Jumu'ah when you go to the masjid. I'm sorry that this is going to sound now like there's pointing fingers, but I'm talking from a sociological perspective to see what society is engaged in. And from that perspective, I've seen and I've taken note of it. You'll see as you get into the parking lot, there'll be guys, talking, chatting, smoking, relaxing, taking it easy. There'll be guys in their cars on their phones. There'll be people engaged in various things, and we must always have a good opinion of people. There's not taking that away from anyone, and not to say that anyone is better than the other. I always add that disclaimer because we have to. We are people of good intentions and good thoughts of others, but you can see when people are engaged in things that are frivolous. And then you come into the masjid also, there's people that came early, but they're sitting right at the back. In one masjid, there's a guy, if the shoe rack was any further, right, if it was outside, he'd be sitting there. He's like literally in between the two shoe racks at the end, but he's early. So sometimes people also come, but they don't want to avail themselves for the opportunity to sit in a lesson. But the complaint will come that the imam takes too long. You get what I mean? That's what I'm getting to. Is that where does the motivation to look at it, to make it shorter come from? What is the reasons for that? And sometimes when you look at it and you say, actually, people are not involved in anything, that is more greater than the Jumu'ah khutbah at the time or the English lecture. And in fact, we're doing things that are really frivolous or things that we can easily give up just for that time.
The masajid I've been to also, majority of the time is at 20 to 20 minutes to 25 minutes. I think very rarely you'll get the 10 minutes. And I think those masajid, or rather the Jamaat as it have, the 10 minutes are performing the salah very early. So for example, they'll say, the Jumu'ah bayan should be from 20 past 12 to half past 12, and then by quarter 2, they got to go out. I think taking into consideration those who are working, look, I don't know about the workplace. I haven't been there. From what I hear, majority of the time of, when they cutting the time down, or when they're trying to finish early, he has to do to accommodate those who are working. So maybe there is a valid reason for why they are shortening the time. Yes, does it come at the detriment of the people? Maybe it does. But what's the reason behind them cutting out the time? Allahu A'lam, Allah knows best. What's the reason? But I think it's important that whatever time we have, I know I made this mistake a couple of times in the past, and then you learn from it as well, is people are watching the clock. Right? So if you're given 25 minutes or 20 minutes, make sure that you stick to your time. Because the moment you go over your time, people just become naturally irritated, and fair enough to them, because they know how long you're supposed to speak for. Make sure you respect the time, that you were given in order to speak within that time. So prepare adequately. Prepare adequately. Time your talks, even if you have to at home. Right. So whether we are given 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 25 minutes, make sure you speak for 25 minutes. Don't speak for half an hour. Right. Because that 5 minutes drags for them. Right? It drags for them, and they know they can pick it up. So I think no matter where we go, whether they're reducing the time or whatever it might be, whatever the reason is, if they are doing that, the duty is upon you and the obligation is upon you to make sure that you finish within the time that you are allocated.
Just if I can touch on one of the issues that were raised now about, with regards to timing and with regards to certain masajid having allocating very small time slots to the English talk. I've encountered this more in like CBD settings, or where in Masajid or Jamaat Khanas that are situated in like a very busy CBD type of environment where people are working, and those people, let's be realistic. Most of the people there are, they're working on a Friday. They're coming to the masjid just to fulfill that fard of Jumu'ah. Their mindset is that, I have to come to the masjid, I have to perform Jumu'ah, so I'm doing it, but they're not doing it necessarily with the intention of coming to listen to a talk that's going to benefit them in some way, or to gain maximum benefit and insight from the speaker's advices. And they might have Allahu Alam, but they might have a specific scholar that they go to, during the weekends or in their free time at home. They might listen to a particular speaker from the United States or from South Africa, from Australia, and then they listen to the Jumu'ah programs from other masajid in their free time. But when they themselves attend the masjid, it's only because they want to fulfill that obligation. And I think that's something that's to be expected. It's normal. And in those cases, if you find yourself speaking in such a setting where, you, for instance, going in the City Bowl in Cape Town, in the CBD, for instance, and you know that everybody's there on their lunch break, they have to get back to work, you need to respect that and keep that in mind. But just to touch on what Sheikh Mohammed Ismail said about the time limits sort of shrinking, the time allocations becoming, this observation that is becoming shorter and shorter. If that is that's prompted by complaints from the community, in cases where it's not a work issue, then I think that could also serve as an indication to us that perhaps the talks are not captivating enough. The people aren't getting the benefit that they should be getting from the masjid, and that's why they feel comfortable saying, these talks are too long, I need to get out of the masjid earlier. So both of those, we need to look at it from both angles and think, are we delivering maximum bang for buck in our talks? And inshallah, the hope is always that we can improve. Inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all khair and increase us and equip us with what we need to be better speakers, inshallah, and to benefit our communities.
One of the three things that are currently on my mind, right, is one, when Jumu'ah rosters are being put together, right? Because you guys are seasoned speakers, right? What advice would you give to, for example, whether it's fellow ulama or whether it's people that are on the masjid committee, the mutawallis, right, that are on the masjid committee, or it may be an individual who's overseen several masajid and several musallas, right, and they have to organize the Jumu'ah roster. What advice would you give? Because I think diversity in terms of speakers is a necessity. You can't have, let's say, for example, this is my personal feeling, you can't have speakers speaking every single week about just only politics and speaking about it in a way that's very much devoid of any type of spirituality, right? So what advice would you give in terms to whoever's compiling, and setting out in schedules and doing the schedules?
The Jumu'ah is an institution, and it's a platform amongst the other platforms that are available in the community, right? If you just think about it in that context, I think if there was such a thing, if there was a youth committee, if there was a women's forum, if there was sort of other feed, platforms or committees that feed into the broader masjid committee, if those existed, it would be important to ask them what are the topical things that they would like to be discussed in the Jumu'ah. Because the Jumu'ah, in that sense, also can be a means of educating people on specific topics, like you say. And those things are quite fluid, they change from time to time. So yeah, I would just add that I think that is one thing. If not available, I don't have an answer, but I think if something like that existed, it would be pretty cool because they would then be able to get a sense of what the pulse of the various branches of the masjid's work is feeling at that moment and use that to encourage speakers to address.
Thinking about trying is going on, for instance, on TikTok Live and then asking people who join the live, what kind of topics do you want discussed at the masjid on a Friday? The problem with that obviously is going to be that you're going to get such a wide variety of responses because there's going to be people from all different social classes, all different age groups. Are going to join your live. So you're going to get so many you're going to be overwhelmed with responses. But if there's a way of narrowing that down to your community, for instance, if you've got a community WhatsApp group or something, create a poll on WhatsApp, maybe think of 3 topics and then say, put a poll on the WhatsApp group and let people vote which topic they would like to hear spoken about from the minbar.
The point that Sheikh Hassan made earlier on with regards to are the speakers using the time correctly? Are they captivating enough? I think what's
one thing
important is, and subhanAllah, we see this from the committee members when they're in charge of the Jummah rosters, they try to call the best speakers. Because, I mean, speaking is not for everyone. Right? There's some people who are not good at speaking, and we just got to face that fact there. So I see committee members, when they're in charge of the roster, they try to get the best of speakers to come, people who can captivate, people who can at least put a message forward and, will be able to do a good job. But many times when the Imam are in charge, they try just to fill up the roster, get anyone and everyone to come and speak. And sometimes this is problematic because you just put anyone there and the guy comes and he doesn't prepare and people can pick these things up, yeah. So I think it's important also set the criteria for yourself, for your community. Who are you calling? Make sure you call people who you know are dedicated, people who know you can speak, and so that there's some fruit that is being delivered so people can benefit and eat from. And therefore, the time will be used in a way where you'll be able to captivate the people. So I think the speaking is not for everyone. So use it and try to call people who you know are good at this particular field. And I think the time will be used in a good way, inshallah.
With that said, I mean, there has to be some type of criteria about like who is invited or selected as speakers. I personally prefer diversity, but at the end of the day, whoever is standing in front of the community speaking about the deen and giving good advices and trying to convey that message of coming closer to Allah. You want someone that is actually credible, and authentic. So there has to be a type of criteria necessary when choosing, because it is possible that you can have someone who's a good speaker, right? They can be very eloquent, a master of rhetoric, but actually their content can be problematic. Like in the run up to this discussion here, I had a conversation with one of my teachers, and he's a senior person, was speaking, and he told me, he said, what's very important is that we must let the Quran and Sunnah speak. We shouldn't come with preconceived notions and then, look for that ayah of Quran and look for that hadith of the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and then basically try to put it in like, interpolation of text, to use that academic expression. We need to let the Quran and the Sunnah actually speak. The message of the deen needs to come through. You shouldn't be like latching onto other, I don't know, let's say isms, and then you try to find an ayah that justifies your position or hadith of the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam that justifies your position. That's just a feeling of mine. Yeah. So another thing I would like to speak about is what happens. Like, this is something that I've heard. That there are certain taboo topics in certain communities, or perhaps even in certain masajid or musallas. You can't speak about these topics. Maybe it's a question of like a person wants to speak, a khatib wants to speak about riba, right? The Jummah speaker wants to speak about riba, and maybe somehow the instructions, they come via the grapevine, right? You can't talk about riba. You can't talk about riba being interest, right? Usually, which is haram in Islam. You can't talk about adultery. You can't talk about there are certain topics, certain red lines, whether it's from, I don't know, the Masjid committee, the Imam of the Masjid, whether the Imam of the Masjid himself can't speak about those issues, or it's coming, someone else in the background, that these topics we can't talk about, we can't engage. Now, people will say this is frightening, that and it's far-fetched that it's happening, but it has happened. And that's a problem because, like, again, referencing the conversation that I had with my ustad, he told me, he said, look, the ulama are supposed to be, that moral center. And if they are not able to communicate that message of Islam on a particular topic out because they've been censured, there is a problem.
Like you said, if that is happening, then it goes against the previous point that you made of letting Quran and Sunnah speak, because you're restricting what Quran and the Sunnah is speaking. If that's the case, then it should be a red flag, not for a topic, a red flag for you to go there, actually. Because, you're not supposed to be there. If you're not allowed to speak on Quran and Sunnah, why are you there?
Yeah, I think we look, at the end of the day, it's going to be an individual consideration, and it's going to be you fighting your own conscience. If you remain silent about a thing that you feel is unjustly being suppressed, if there's a topic that the community wants silenced or censored that does not deserve to be silenced or censored, and especially if it's something that's clear in Quran and Sunnah, then either you should rethink your connection to that community, or think about how you can change it. And the only way to change it is to inject the light of the Quran and the Sunnah into that community by speaking about it. And that might have consequences, sometimes rather severe consequences for you, but at the end of the day, you're going to be asked about what you did about it. And you don't want to face Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knowing that, something was, injustice was being committed and you didn't speak out about it. So, that's an individual battle that we might have to fight. But sometimes these kind of taboo topics are not necessarily so clear. They're not necessarily something that's black and white. In terms of the nusus, there might not be a very clear hukum on it, clear ruling on it. And in those cases, I think we need to exercise some sensitivity and be sensible. Think about whether the topic really is worth broaching, whether the harm of raising that topic in that community is going to be greater than the benefit of it. And then sometimes the benefit of bringing that topic up, that uncomfortable topic, is greater than the harm. So in that case, you have to go about it, but you have to do that calculation yourself. Sometimes that comes about by doing research and by feeling the community out and being in touch with the people. So yeah, but it comes down to individual decision making and taqwa. I mean, it's about, are you going to remain silent when you see an injustice going on, or are you going to encourage that injustice, wa na'udhu billah, or are you going to perhaps upset the whole community and cause greater harm by raising a topic that wasn't necessarily as necessary to address as you thought. So that's something we individually have to decide on.
Something that's important, and I feel, is that we need to differentiate between, let's say, for example, speakers and scholars. And yes, we want the scholars in front to do the speaking, because then, inshallah, it's credible, authentic knowledge that they're disseminating. But there is a difference between when someone is a good speaker and a situation where a person is not very, very scholarly. So the person comes out, they're very verbose, they're very eloquent, they can speak, but these are not the people that are necessarily doing their homework on a day-to-day basis, as scholars should do, by reading works, listening to other scholars, engaging the Islamic intellectual and spiritual tradition on the daily basis, so that when they have to speak at Jumu'ah, you can see that natural flow of knowledge, compared to, and there is this practice of where, for example, I listen to something on YouTube, like 20 minutes before I have to go into deliver a discourse on it for another 20 minutes. So I have 20 minutes to speak. So I listen to somebody else's 20 minutes or 30 minutes talk. I have done no research, no preparation. I've never cracked open the books that I cracked open the books and read, right? And then I come in, I bamboozle the crowd. But then your knowledge is literally just 20 minutes of what you heard. Perhaps some great speaker whose YouTube video has been online, and you engage with that, and that's what you come and you give to society. I think that's actually doing a disservice to communities.
I think we have to be proactive in this approach, right? Instead of being reactive, in terms of the fact that if we have scholars who are unable to speak, then let them become speakers. Let's teach them the etiquette of speaking, right? I mean, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was, subhanallah, as we know, an ummi, right? But he held the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum around him that had particular skills, and he would use those skills. Like he sent Mu'adh ibn Jabal. When the Prophet was having trouble with regards to the letters of the Jews, he told Mu'adh, go and study the language of the Jews and come assist me. What I'm saying is that if you have, mashallah, people who are knowledgeable, then allow them to go out and actually learn the art of speaking so that they can present that knowledge to people. And remember, we're not here to be entertained on the Friday on the Jumu'ah khutbah. If we were to be entertained and we were there to be mesmerized, let's call a comedian so that he can come and make us laugh for 20 minutes. Let's just have that rather. No, but we're here for spiritual benefit. So if a person doesn't have that knowledge, then he has no place on spitting on the mimbar. So we should be, that's why you say, going back to the other point that you had about having a criteria. I think that's extremely important. You got to look at, yes, somebody who can speak, but somebody who speaks on the truth. Not just somebody who speaks on anything for that matter, because we can go out in the street and find someone, right? But like how in a convention, a medical convention, or any other scientific convention for that matter, they're looking for people who are masters in the field, but they can speak as well and can present in a good way. Similarly, yeah, let's have some sort of criteria. We're looking for scholars, people who are knowledgeable in the field of Islamic studies, but at the same time, someone who can present that which he has studied and his knowledge in a beautiful way. And I think that will just, subhanAllah, make the task a bit easier and will allow that 20 minutes to captivate the people. So you grant them a good, talk, but at the same time, there's some spirituality that they are being elevated in.
Yeah, I think there have been instances where the skill of comedy and giving over maw'idah combine and overlap. So we have, for instance, the much beloved Sheikh Dawood Sampson from Cape Town, who's fairly entertaining and comedic in his talks. But it has an effect, and it comes down to, again, knowing your crowd, like the Gen Z people would say, knowing the vibes.
Shukran jazilan for availing yourselves and sharing your thoughts with us. I really appreciate the input.